My name is Elena Rivera, and if you'd asked my family, I stopped existing the day I enlisted. Funny how the child who played Army with sticks in the backyard became the one they quietly buried in family photos, traditions, and conversations. So when my younger brother Luis announced he was getting married, I didn't expect much. But I never imagined I'd be excluded. Not forgotten. Erased. The wedding invitations were sent out in beautiful ivory envelopes with gold foil names. My cousin Maya posted hers on Instagram like a badge of honor. Everyone gushed in the comments. Everyone, except me. I didn't get one. At first, I thought it was a mistake. So I called my mom. Oh, she said casually, like we were discussing laundry. Well, you've been away for so long. Luis and Anna didn't think you'd be able to make it. It's such a small guest list. I'm his sister, I wanted to scream. Your daughter. Instead, I said, I just finished my deployment. I'm literally home next week. Yes, well, we assumed you'd be exhausted. Besides, Anna's side of the family is quite large. That's how I learned I'd been replaced by people who didn't even know how Luis liked his coffee growing up. My hands shook when I hung up. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later, in a sharper, colder form. Right now, I was something far worse, invisible. Not even worth making a seat for. I had served 8 years in the Army, risen to captain, and led over 200 personnel on logistics and defense ops. But to them, I was still the tomboy with too much attitude who didn't wear makeup or talk about wedding dresses. The girl who made them uncomfortable at baby showers. Who couldn't be tamed into a feminine frame. So they cut me out of the picture. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through engagement photos my brother had posted. His fiancée Anna in white chiffon. Him beaming. And my mother, smiling wide in a dress she once swore was too modern, now standing like royalty in the middle of it all. No mention of me. No trace I existed. I didn't cry. I had learned in the service that tears don't fix anything. Plans do. And as I looked at my framed certificate, Captain Elena Rivera, Command Division, a quiet voice stirred inside me. If they won't give you a seat at the table, bring your own. And bring it loud enough that no one can ignore your arrival. The next morning, I woke up early. Old habits die hard. Even though I was no longer on deployment, I still rose with the same discipline. But this morning, it wasn't just muscle memory. It was fury wrapped in silence. I opened my family's group chat. The messages were lighting up. Final dress fitting today. Rehearsal dinner seating confirmed. Can't wait to see everyone. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I scrolled up. My last message was 2 months ago, a picture from my promotion ceremony overseas. Not a single reply. No congrats, no emoji, no acknowledgement. I'd become a ghost in my own bloodline. That afternoon, I sat with my best friend, Jada, in a quiet coffee shop. She raised an eyebrow after I told her everything. Wait, they're having a 200-person wedding and didn't invite their own daughter/sister/captain. I nodded slowly, the bitterness still heavy on my tongue. You should crash it, she said bluntly. Show up in uniform, flanked by the damn Secret Service. We both laughed, but something inside me clicked. No, not crash it. Command it. I had no intention of starting drama, but I wasn't going to let them pretend I didn't exist. I wouldn't stand outside the church window while they toasted to a family I wasn't welcome in. So I called in a favor. 2, actually. First was Commander Patel, my old logistics mentor who now ran high-level event security protocols for private military contractors. He owed me big time. Second was Staff Sergeant Knox, one of my former soldiers, now running tactical security for VIP functions. When I told them the situation, they didn't laugh. They didn't say, you're overreacting. They said, where and when? 3 days before the wedding, my mother posted a Facebook album titled, Countdown to the Big Day. Every picture. My brother and his fiancée. My mom. My dad. My cousins. My sister-in-law's family. Me? Nowhere. I clicked save because I wanted to remember exactly who they were before the world found out who I had become. 3 days before the wedding, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, staring at the uniform I hadn't worn since my return home. It still held its shape, Crisp color. Polished brass. For ribbons of service. One patch earned in a desert no one in my family had ever asked about. I ran my fingers across the nameplate. Rivera. I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like a ghost preparing for war. That night, I typed out a list, not of who had wronged me, but of who still remembered me. People who mattered. People who stood with me when the ground beneath my life had shifted. Lieutenant Colonel Saunders, my CO during my second deployment. Maya, my cousin who secretly messaged, "I'm sorry they didn't include you." Knox, who once took a bullet in training and still laughed through the stitches. Jada, who'd never once let me sit in my pain alone. They would be my real family now, and I would walk in with that truth at my side. Meanwhile, the wedding chatter raged online. I saw photos of the venue, a glassy hilltop vineyard, white roses, candlelit banquet halls, gold-plated name cards, and yet, no Captain Elena Rivera among them. Funny, my name had appeared in military briefings across 3 continents, but not once on the RSVP list for my own brother's wedding. The night before the event, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey, I know you weren't invited, but you should still come." It was Luis, my brother. I stared at the screen, stunned. Was this an apology? A peace offering? Then a second message arrived. Anna's dad said it would make people uncomfortable having someone in the military there. Mom agreed, said it might ruin the mood. There it was. My presence wasn't just inconvenient. It was offensive. Something to be hidden so the air could stay light. So their world could stay small. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. Because the next day, they wouldn't just see me. They'd stand for me. The morning of the wedding broke calm and sunny, like the universe had no idea what was about to happen. I slipped into my uniform slowly, deliberately. Every crease sharp, every medal secured, every piece perfectly aligned. This wasn't just fabric and metal. It was a declaration. You didn't want me in the photo. Now I'll be the only thing anyone remembers. Outside, 2 black SUVs waited. In the front car, Sergeant Knox sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, headset in place. Behind him, a second vehicle carried Lieutenant Colonel Saunders and 2 off-duty MPs in full dress, all volunteers from my old base, all of them asking to stand behind me. Not because I was their boss, but because they believed in what I stood for. At exactly 2:45 p.m., we rolled out. The vineyard was pristine. Rolling hills, rows of white chairs, a decorated arch with soft violin music drifting from the speakers. Guests were already seated, photographers positioned, the bridal party lining up. I stayed hidden just beyond the trees with Knox and Saunders, waiting for our cue. And then, "We are ready for the bride," came the announcer's voice over the speaker. That was my moment, not to interrupt, but to arrive. Overhead, the thunder rolled in, not from clouds, but from rotors. A private tactical transport helicopter, owned by Commander Patel's logistics company, came into view. Its dark frame cast a long, sweeping shadow across the vineyard. People turned. Chatter stopped. Glasses froze midair. And when it began descending, just behind the vineyard, I stepped out from the trees. Elena Rivera. Full uniform. Flanked by security. Head held high. Not as a sister. Not as a guest. As a captain. Knox clicked his mic. Eagle has eyes. Moving forward. The wedding staff panicked, unsure whether to stop the ceremony or call someone. But I wasn't here for them. From across the lawn, I saw Luis's face go pale. His bride blinked in confusion. My mother? She looked like she'd seen a ghost dressed in metals. And just as I reached the edge of the ceremony aisle, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Captain Rivera." Everyone turned. It was the best man, Luis's old college friend, now a Navy reservist. He stepped forward and, in full view of the guests, snapped into a perfect salute. Silence fell like thunder. And then, the rest of my team followed suit. Knox, Saunders, even the MPs behind them. In one motion, they saluted. The guests? They stood. Not because they knew what was happening, but because instinct told them respect when they saw it. I returned the salute, then walked toward the edge of the ceremony and took a seat in the very front row. There was no name card. I didn't need one. For a moment, the world forgot the bride. All eyes were on me, the uninvited ghost, now seated front and center, glowing in decorated uniform. Luis shifted on his feet. Anna looked to her father in confusion. My mother clutched her pearls like a storm had blown through her perfect little ceremony. No one stopped me. No one dared. The music restarted. The officiant stumbled over his words. And just like that, the show went on. But the atmosphere had changed. No longer a wedding. Now a reckoning. After the vows, awkward and rushed guests filtered into the reception hall. White draped tables. Champagne towers. Floral chandeliers. I took my place near the exit, where no one could say I blocked the spotlight. But the spotlight followed me anyway. People whispered, "Is that her? The captain? Did you see the helicopter?" Even guests from Anna's side stared with a mixture of awe and discomfort. No one, not one person, asked why I was left off the list. They just knew I was the one they wouldn't forget. Then came the toasts. Luis stood and tapped his glass. "Thank you all for coming. Anna and I are so grateful to have so many loved ones here." His eyes flicked toward me, just for a second, but skipped right past like I was too heavy to acknowledge. He went on about love and family, about support and shared dreams. Then Anna's father stood up, smug with champagne. "To the families who raised these two incredible young people, may your legacy live on through them." I held my glass, but didn't drink. That legacy didn't include me. But then, the microphone passed to the best man. The same man who had saluted me on the lawn. He stepped up, cleared his throat, and paused. I had a whole thing prepared, but I want to speak from the heart. He looked directly at me. "Luis, you were my best friend in college. You helped me through some rough patches. But your sister, Captain Rivera, helped save lives." The room tensed. While we were out drinking and chasing jobs, she was overseas commanding actual missions. She didn't just serve. She led. A few people clapped cautiously. He kept going. I was shocked to hear she wasn't invited today. But seeing her show up anyway, with grace, with dignity, with her team behind her, reminded me what true strength looks like. Now the applause grew. People weren't sure what to do, but they clapped. Anna's dad sat frozen. My mother stared at her lap. Luis looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. And I just sat there and smiled. As the applause faded, I could feel the temperature in the room shift. The guests tried to return to their shrimp cocktails and wedding cake, but their eyes kept flicking toward me. Luis looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own tuxedo. Anna whispered something in his ear. Her smile tightened with every second. My mother wouldn't look up. And honestly, that was fine with me. I got up quietly and stepped out onto the garden terrace, needing a breath of air. I didn't expect anyone to follow me, but they did. First came Luis, jacket off, anger simmering beneath the surface. "What the hell was that?" he snapped. "You hijacked our wedding. Made it about you." I turned slowly. "I didn't give the speech, Luis. Your best man did." He ran a hand through his hair. "You flew in a helicopter." "A helicopter, Elena. Who even does that?" I stepped closer. People who weren't invited. People who served while you and Mom tried to scrub me out of every family event for the last 5 years. He froze. "You know that's not true. You sent out 200 invitations. You couldn't make room for your own sister." He didn't answer, because there was no good answer. Then Mom walked out. Her face tight, her voice low. "Elena, sweetheart, you've made your point. But this wasn't the time or place." I stared at her, really stared, and saw the same forced grace she used when explaining to relatives why I wasn't in Christmas photos. The time and place would have been an invitation. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We didn't want drama. Anna's family is very traditional. And I'm what? A scandal. "You're intense," she said, soft but sharp. "You've always made things difficult." The words hit harder than a bullet. Not because they were new, but because they were confirmation. I stood there in full uniform, decorated for service they'd never even asked about. And she called me difficult. Not brave. Not accomplished. Not even welcome. Just difficult. I swallowed hard. I came here to honor this family. Not because I needed validation, but because I earned my place. And I won't apologize for refusing to be erased. Luis said nothing. Mom looked away. And then the best man walked out, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and said loudly enough for them both to hear, "The only reason anyone will remember this wedding is her." I nodded politely, stepped away from them, and returned to the celebration. They could keep their legacy. I had built my own. Back inside the reception hall, the music swelled again. Guests danced, laughed, toasted, but something had shifted. There was a tension that hadn't been there before. Not chaos, not conflict, respect. Even people who didn't know who I was suddenly wanted to. A woman from Anna's side approached me cautiously. "You're Elena, right? Luis's sister." I gave her a polite nod. "You're kind of the main character today." She smiled awkwardly and slipped away. I wasn't trying to steal attention, but I wasn't hiding anymore either. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. The photographer's voice cut through the room. "Okay, we're going to take the official family portraits now. Rivera family, please gather near the floral arch." My stomach twisted. I stood still, unsure if I should leave or just disappear quietly. But then, the best man appeared beside me again. "You going?" I hesitated. "They probably don't want me in that photo." He smiled. "They don't get to decide that anymore." I walked toward the group slowly. Luis saw me coming and looked tired, like someone carrying a lie too long, knowing the truth was gaining on him. My mother stiffened. Anna blinked, obviously unsure how to react. But the photographer? She smiled and waved me in without hesitation. "Come on, Captain Rivera, we need you right in the center. You're glowing." I stood between my father and Luis. Neither one said a word. But when the flash clicked, it captured something they couldn't edit out. Not just a woman in uniform, but a daughter who endured their silence and stood taller for it. After the photos, my father leaned in, voice low. "You made your point." I turned toward him calmly. It was never a point. It was my place. Later, I watched from a quiet corner as the slideshow of childhood memories played on the reception wall, years of holidays, birthdays, baby photos. I wasn't in most of them. But tonight, I had changed the narrative. Because in the photos taken today, the ones that would live on mantles and social media and albums, I was there. Decorated, dignified, undeniable. The reception had shifted into its second wind, dancing, cake cutting, endless rounds of toasts. But the tension still simmered under the polished surface. And then it happened. "Now, before we close out the night," said the DJ into the mic, "the bride and groom have asked one more person to say a few words." I blinked. Surely not me. Captain Elena Rivera. My eyes met Luis's across the room. He looked pale, unsure, but he nodded once. The mic was handed to me. And for a second, just one, I considered saying no, walking away. But I didn't come this far to remain silent. I stepped up to the mic and looked out at a sea of faces, some familiar, many not, all expecting drama or tears or maybe an explosion. Instead, I smiled. "Thank you. I wasn't supposed to be here today, but sometimes life doesn't go by the invitation list." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. I spent years away from home, not just in miles, but in understanding. I missed birthdays, holidays, weddings. I glanced toward my parents. But while I was gone, I learned something important. Family isn't always who shares your last name. A few heads turned. It's who shows up for you. It's who salutes your presence, not your absence. It's who lets you be exactly who you are, medals and all. I looked toward Anna and Luis. Today, I saw love. But I also saw people trying to grow, even if they're late to the journey. I set the mic down and walked off the stage. No fireworks, no revenge speech, just truth. And somehow, that hit harder than anything else I could have said. Back at my table, my best man friend clapped quietly. That was class, Rivera. Pure class. I didn't come to embarrass anyone. I came to remind them I existed, and that I never stopped being someone worth showing up for. As I sat back down, something unusual happened. The crowd didn't turn away. They leaned in. And then, slowly, hesitantly, one guest stood up with a glass in hand. To Captain Rivera, he said quietly. A pause. Then another voice. For her service and for reminding us what it means to show up. Then a third. To the sister who should have never needed an invitation. Suddenly, the entire room rose. A standing toast. Glasses clinking. Applause swelling. A spontaneous moment that didn't belong to the bride or the groom, but to the one person they had tried to leave out. I didn't know where to look. So I looked at Luis. He wasn't smiling, not really. But he wasn't angry either. His eyes were glassy, his mouth drawn tight. He raised his glass too. To my sister, he said, barely audible, who showed me more courage than I ever had the right to expect. For the first time in years, I believed him. My mother didn't speak, but she dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Whether from shame or pride, I still don't know. But I didn't need it spelled out. Sometimes silence is an apology. And sometimes public acknowledgement is the only truth that matters. The rest of the evening blurred handshakes, congratulations, quiet murmurs of thank you for your service. Anna approached me gently. I didn't know how much they left out, she said. I see it now. I'm sorry. I nodded. Forgiveness wasn't immediate, but the wall had cracked. And from where I stood, that was enough. As the night wore down, the photographer returned one last time. Captain Rivera, would you mind one more photo? This time, it was me alone. In front of the floral arch. Medals gleaming. Shoulders square. No one cutting me from the frame. A portrait of presence. Of power. Of peace earned the hard way. The next morning, the wedding photos were everywhere. Anna's Instagram. Family group chats. Posts tagged with glowing captions like, a perfect day for a perfect couple. But one image kept surfacing more than the others. Me, standing tall, uniform pressed, medals shining, a veteran, a sister, the woman they hadn't planned for but couldn't ignore. Later that week, a distant uncle called me, one who hadn't spoken to me in years. I didn't know you were, a captain, he said awkwardly. That's okay, I replied. Most of them didn't. Then he added something that stayed with me. You didn't make a scene. You made a point. Back home, I opened a small envelope someone had slipped into my purse at the reception. It was a handwritten note. You showed us grace, not vengeance. Thank you for your example. Luis. Simple. Late. But sincere. Weeks passed. The wedding faded into memory for most. But something had changed permanently. My mother called more often, softer now. Less critical. My father sent me a framed photo from the reception with a note. For my daughter, who stood taller than we ever deserved. Even Anna followed me on LinkedIn and tagged me in a post that read, here's to women who build their legacy one earned step at a time. But I didn't need their words anymore. Because I'd already reclaimed my name. Not with bitterness. Not with shame. But with presence. With showing up on my terms, uniform or not. A month later, I was invited to speak at a local high school's Veterans Day assembly. I stood at the podium, looking at a sea of young faces. And I told them, your value isn't decided by who sends you an invitation. It's decided by how you show up for yourself. And when you do, they can't erase you. Not from the frame. Not from the story. Not ever again. I walked off stage to a standing ovation. Not for being perfect, but for being present. The sister no one planned to include. Who became the one they could never forget. 2 weeks after the wedding, my inbox pinged with an unexpected email. Subject, U.S. Department of Defense. Recognition request. I stared at it, unsure if it was real. Inside, a formal letter invited me to speak at the National Women in Service Summit in Washington, D.C. Not as a guest. Not as an attendee. But as a keynote speaker. I sat in silence for a moment, staring at the screen. Me? The daughter who'd been called too intense. The sister left off the guest list. The woman erased from the family photo wall. Now being asked to speak to generals, senators, commanders, and the next generation of women in uniform. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like something bigger. The day of the summit, I stood backstage, adjusting my collar. Same uniform. Same ribbons. But this time, my posture had changed. I wasn't just wearing pride. I had become the symbol of it. When I stepped onto that stage, applause erupted, and it wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous. Earned. I looked out over the crowd, all ranks, all genders, all backgrounds. And I spoke. Sometimes you fight wars on foreign soil. And sometimes the hardest battles are the ones inside your own home. A hush fell over the room. But no matter where you serve, in uniform or in silence, your presence matters. Even when they erase your name, even when they seat you at the back, even when they tell you you're too much. Because someday, they'll look up and see you standing on the stage they never imagined for you. After my speech, I was approached by a senior officer in full formal dress. She didn't say much, just handed me a small envelope. Inside, recommendation for promotion, Major Elena Rivera. The girl who wasn't invited to her own brother's wedding was now being fast-tracked for leadership at the highest level. As I left the stage, I received a message from Luis. Everyone's talking about your speech. I watched it twice. I cried. There were no excuses in his message. No justifications. Only something I hadn't heard in years. I'm proud of you, Elena. Truly. Finally. Proud. And that, I realized, wasn't validation. It was closure. Because I had already proven myself. He had just finally caught up. 3 months after the summit, I returned to the town I once left in silence. Not for a ceremony. Not for family. Just to visit. A walk through familiar streets. Old brick houses. Rustling autumn leaves. The corner cafe that still burned their coffee. And the VA clinic. The one where they never put up my photo. The one that always had room for my brother's fundraising flyers, but never posted my deployment notice. I pulled into the parking lot, unsure why I was even there. Closure, maybe. Inside, the walls looked the same, beige, quiet, bureaucratic. Until I saw it. Just past the front desk, mounted proudly beneath a glass plaque. Local veteran honored. Major Elena Rivera, speaker, soldier, sister. Below it, a blown-up photo from the summit, me in full dress uniform, addressing the nation. I stood frozen, not with pride, not with pain, but with peace. They hadn't forgotten me. They just needed to see me for who I truly was. As I turned to leave, a teenage girl in jeans and a hoodie stopped me. Hey, are you the soldier in that picture? I smiled. Yeah, that's me. That's so cool. I want to join the Air Force too. But my family says it's not for girls. I looked at her, saw in her eyes the same fire I once held. They're wrong, I said gently. Don't wait for their permission. Just earn your own respect. She nodded like it meant the world. Maybe to her, it did. Back outside, the sun broke through the clouds. And I realized the story wasn't just about proving something to my family anymore. It was about giving voice to every woman who had been silenced. Every sister left off the invitation list. Every daughter called too much. That night, I sat on the porch of my rental home with Zoe and Maya, the people who never once forgot me. And I said quietly, it's funny. They tried to erase me, but now I'm in their photo albums, their town bulletin, their history. Zoe grinned. That's not revenge. That's legacy. Maya raised a toast. To Captain Elena Rivera, the woman they tried to keep out, who walked right through the front door anyway. We laughed. We sipped. And for the first time in years, I finally felt home.